Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Shar and Sam.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Good morning, Lisa.
Who's first, the chicken or the egg?
It's always like that, right?
Yep.
I'll just toss that out as the philosophical question of the day. No, you're going to ask it, Sumit, and yes, I'm happy to address. That's a good one.
Yeah, and so what we've done is I'm going to go ahead and I'm setting up Facebook Live and we're live right now with streaming, and so we're welcoming everybody coming on the presentation.
Yeah, and I just want to say it's so nice to have all these new online screenings and podcasts. And recently, I have been learning so much. I love, it's called Master Class, and it is masters of every type of profession. And so don't ask me all their names, but like the photographer of John Lennon, the photographer of, major presidents, just some beautiful photography. I've been wanting to learn photography, and basically their classes, and they're in 10-minute segments, so you don't get too bored. And then usually there's like 18 of them. But I've been learning cooking skills. So Wolfgang Puck has been on there, and Gordon Ramsay. What's his name? The guy, the Hell Kitchen guy.
Gordon Ramsay, yeah.
Yep. So there's this other guy that teaches you how to make proper scrambled eggs. So his advice is not to break the yolk, not to scramble the egg. You actually cook the white of the yolk, and then when that's cooked, then you scramble the yolk of the egg, and you mix it, and it makes better tasting scrambled eggs. So I've been learning things about painting. And then one of my favorite things is at my company, we had a really bad contentious discussion one day. And we wanted to talk about a crucial negotiation with one of our locations. And one of our leaders started yelling at one of my other leaders. So I went out on master class, and his last name is Ross. But he's an FBI negotiator, and he goes in hostage situations, and he teaches you how to communicate people that are being volatile. And it's just basic communication stuff like mirroring and labeling, and just the way you communicate people to get them to calm down. And I've been certified in crucial conversations and crucial confrontations. But what I love is that there's this new technology now. And you don't just have to go to YouTube. There's all these classes now that you can take online, and you can become an expert at anything.
Yeah, it's nice that they have those things out there. Are you? I imagine you're probably leveraging a lot of those photography skills in Puerto Vallarta down there.
A little bit. Yes, I would say yes. When like the morning after, and you look at your Facebook posts and go, okay, that looks ridiculous. Yeah, usually I delete those, but but yeah, that's my plan, because we have beautiful tropical plants, beautiful, awesome, birds, and obviously the islands and ocean. And so this is a great place. And then when I get back to Colorado in April, yeah, that's my plan. When I start, doing a little bit of camping and going to some of the places that you like to go to, Sam.
Yeah.
Maybe rent a little RV or something, and maybe try Well, one year I actually got some beautiful aspen pictures in Aspen because in the fall, Aspen is beautiful, right,
Oh,
Lisa?
Yeah, especially up around Vail. I've never seen them anywhere else in Colorado like that place. It's really amazing.
Yeah. But what I love is that these days, in order for people to deal with their stress from their work and stress from all their things, like what my company does is I encourage my employees to have hobbies and to live their dreams. Like one of my best friends is a boat captain. So I've been coaching her, how can we help you become a real boat captain?
Yeah.
And she's gonna do it. So that's always been her dream. Well, she is kind of a boat captain, but it's kind of on a smaller scale. But
Mhm.
but yeah, pretty fun, pretty fun. And I know I went from online training to career transformation, but that's what I love about 2021. Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah,
2021 is the
that's
year
right.
to follow your dream.
That's right. So I read something yesterday, Shar, about that made me think about your company and your strategy for pay and work life balance. And one of the things that we're going into right now is that we're trying to people are realizing that there's more to life and so forth than just money and success and so forth. A lot of people are following their passions, and as a result, a big trend is rewarding people with a reduced work week so that they can follow their passions. And I know at your company, you currently pay full-time wages for almost part-time employment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and thanks to your help with the compensation expertise, although you were kind of cringing, I have to admit,
Yeah.
but that, that was our goal, is like we're gonna be very competitive with our pay, and it's turned out that our employees work harder, stronger.
Yep.
Their results are going out the roof because they have time for their passions.
Right.
So
And so exactly, having having your pay align, you're still requiring the same amount of production, but since that people are motivated to get that production done faster or so that they can enjoy their off time. Yeah.
yes, and with the TMA method, we talk about career mobility. So we talk about drives and talents and interests, and so of course, I don't get too much into people's personal lives, but I do talk about, oh, you want to be a boat captain someday, you know? Oh, you want to hike, you want to be a photographer, you want to be an incredible cook.
Right.
And then I give them all these resources and coaches and the time to do their interest and my employees' engagement. I mean, I used to do the traditional employee engagement programs, as most companies do. But I think a key to real employee engagement is that employees believe that we believe that you can have a life outside of work, and we want to support you in a life outside of work. And not only that, help coach you on how you can achieve your goals
Right.
outside of work.
Shar,
Yeah.
that point, and I know we've got to start here soon, but that point is one that would be, we were talking, I think you were there, about, questions during my presentation. And one of the trends I'm going to talk about today is on a Deloitte human capital trend study on well-being being the #1 trend around work. And that was actually cited by 80% of over 9,000 respondents in their study. And so what I'm thinking of is when I start to talk about that, that would be a really great place to insert this, because it is such a great example, of it's just the new world of work looks like. And that whole well-being theme was even cited before COVID hit, where now like gotten even more important for people to have strategies around that for their employees.
Right.
Absolutely.
Good point. Well, it is the top of the hour, so we should probably kick things
Should we
off.
get going? Well, this is the cue. Well, happy new year, everyone. It is 2021 and here we are. And this is the People Strategies Forum, and we are so happy you've decided to join us. And I'm telling you, this is one of those locations you get positive, upbeat, insightful, and masterful insight to how you could be one of the best employers out there and just one of the best leaders and what we call a real people of choice, employer of choice is what
Right.
I say. And my company says that to me all the time, and I'm very super proud. But I say part of the reason of that is because I host these people strategy forums. So welcome. So this is sponsored by TMA and Comp Team, and you're going to hear a lot about TMA and Comp Team through our presentation today. And as you can see from our slide here, this is a mastermind of leaders. We're dedicated to creating workplaces where people can thrive, employees reward, not only reward employees, but employers reward the customers that they love. So what an amazing concept that your employees absolutely love to bring customers a great experience. So we are your hosts today. As you can see on the slide here, I'm the first one in the blue. My name is Shar Miller, and I'm a people strategist. And I'm very happy to not only have well over, and I don't, okay, let's just say 25 years of HR, traditional HR and talent management experience when I finally decided to get into talent management strategy. I also do coaching, career coaching, and I call it HR with a heart, which is where it shows that you can have a heart when you work with employers, and that HR people can have hearts too. If you can find a company with a culture like that, then that's the kind of company to work for. So I do that kind of coaching. And then my third thing I love to do is work with Comp Team, and I'm also a TMA coach, and I work with my lovely team here. So as you can see to the next part is Sam Reeve. He's a reward strategist. Sam and I met, gosh, 3 years ago. I don't know, a while, right, Sam?
Yeah, it's been a while.
And Sam and I have worked together. He is a reward and compensation strategist. And what's been beautiful is how we have been able to integrate talent management strategy into compensation and total reward strategy. So it is masterful, I have to tell you. And we can show you real life examples. My company has actually utilized what we've learned, and we've become very successful. So anyway, Sam is also our host, and I have to give compliments to Sam's team because they're behind the scenes helping us with all the technology. And then I want to introduce Lisa Jackson. She's a culture strategist, and I have to tell you, she's with Culture Pros, and I'm telling you, what a brain. She has a mind that is, look at her screen here. Look at the companies that she's worked with. And she's a specialist in how you also integrate talent management strategy with culture, and also just very passionate. And she predominantly works with the C-level and also the leaders around talent and driving culture. And then also I want to introduce Sumit Singla. And Sumit is, what a pleasure. Sumit is from India. I have to bring up the diversity piece there because he teaches us stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a typical American and I did not think of it that way. And Sumit is also worked with some big companies and also a people strategist. And I have to tell you, his insight is very powerful. Particularly if you're a global employer and you want to learn, I would like you to reach out to Sumit because he's phenomenal. So this is our host for today. So going into some logistics, and then I'll talk about the agenda. So welcome to today's People Strategy Forum. You're going to notice this on this webinar that we have a chat, we have Q&A, and please be involved. Put in your questions, put in your comments. Just be a little appropriate, of course, but please talk with us. Let us know what you're interested in. If you have an insight, an idea, a link, a resource, or if you have some topics that you want us to talk about, because we are looking for some future speakers and future experts, please put that in the chat and the Q&A. And then we're going to be watching the chat, and we're going to involve them. And if you really are brave and you want to get on screen, we might be able to pull you into the panelist group and have you part of our team and share your insight with us. So today's culture is called Leadership and Culture, an exponential formula for growth and endurance. And of course, Sam puts these big words in there. Anyway, but that is our discussion for today. And then at the end, we are going to have open discussion and questions. Also, before we get started, you're going to notice we're on Facebook Live. Yell over at your partner or your friend and say, get on the Facebook Live, check it out, because we're there. And share on LinkedIn as well. Share on all your social media platforms. We are everywhere. And we'd love to invite your colleagues, leaders that you know, friends, and this is very helpful and very information. So let's get going. Let's get going with our forum today. So I would like to have Sumit and Lisa. Let's take it away. Hi, Sumit and Lisa. What's going on?
Hey there, Shar. It's inauguration day.
It is.
We're going to talk about leadership and culture in light of transfer of power. No, not really. That we're going to lose a whole category of people if I go down that road. But I do need to, I think, do I have the share screen here? Oh, it looks like I do. Yes. Screen sharing permissions. But yes, thank you, Shar. We are going to talk today about leadership and culture, and particularly around some trends that I started researching for just as I'm putting out content on my social media and et cetera. What are some of the trends that people should be watching for and paying attention to around these topics in 2021? So that's going to be kind of our focus, and looking forward to the discussion with Sumit, because he has got wisdom that I don't in this regard. So thank you, Sumit, for joining me today on this topic as I try and figure out how to get my my slides. I am going to just confess, I've always worked in PowerPoint my whole corporate career, and we've switched to Canva, and because it's just got lots better tools for graphics and things. But it is been, as you can see, I'm not very good at figuring out the interface here. So
oh my goodness, you are a genius. You are brilliant, my
there
friend.
we go. Yay.
All right. You got it. I knew you could do it, girl.
Okay, 5 trends. Here we go. So I want to begin with this whole topic on leadership and culture with some wise words from McKinsey. This is from a June 2020 article, Organizing for the Future. Quote, in business today, we're seeing a story unfold before our eyes, one that has happened before, but not in our lifetime. When technologies converge, industries transform, and work is remade. Since the 18th century, at least 3 industrial revolutions have occurred in which predictability and scalability became king in business. For the innovators, productivity soared. The fundamental challenge today is even the most successful companies are designed around old rules of management thinking that emerged during the first industrial revolution, approximately 250 years ago. Cultures built for uniformity, bureaucracy, and control. If you ask executives about their organization, most flexibly reach for what, Sumit, do they reach for? Their org chart, right? Our research over the past 2 years suggests that what we see now is not the fourth industrial revolution. It is the first true information revolution. A new set of technologies is enabling the full automation of routine tasks, lowering transaction costs, and interconnectivity that enables self-organizing complexity at unprecedented speed. In this arena, as in any revolution, the innovators will win in business, unquote. So these are really some really powerful words from McKinsey, but they've got to be grounded in today's companies through intentional and bold change. And what I talk about a lot is really embedding the capacity for continuous change into the organization. And it does require really different kind of leadership, culture, and strategy than what most companies are built for. So we're going to talk a little bit about those 5 trends in a minute, but I want to tee it up with this awareness, and I use this is a core sort of teaching model in my work, that in a healthy organization, it is a balancing act of 3 areas of focus. And the first, obviously, is strategy. And I think of, and you know, what's not here is vision and purpose, but what I'm talking about is once those kind of pieces are established as to what is our mission, why do we exist, what do we stand for, the balancing forces in any organization are always a model of realizing that we only have so much scarcity of time. So what do we put our attention on? And I like to think of these as 3 legs of a stool. The foundation for any organization's growth and health is about balancing these, and it isn't always about the perfect balance of them. So during any kind of change, and which often change is led in the realm of strategy in an organization, they're pivoting around a particular market competitive force, a regulatory force, a growth force, a merger, you know, it happens, whatever the change is, there's a change in the strategy, and that often tees up some kind of reaction or non-reaction in leadership and culture in terms of how it's appropriate. Is this making sense to you, Sumit?
Absolutely, Lisa. But whenever I see the words culture and strategy together, it just reminds me of the Drucker quote, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I've struggled to understand that quote, and my variation of that is culture eats strategy for breakfast and then goes hungry for the rest of the day. So looking at...
I've never heard that before. That's really good. I know. I think
so the second part of it is my invention. That's why it's the first time it's been put up in a public forum. So it's a historic day.
I love it. And so does that for you? So what my reaction to that is that what it often means is that the strategy is what the organization puts most of its time, attention, and resources on. And the planning and execution of the strategy, and even to the point of change management, is part of the strategy, right? In terms of getting the people on board. And I do think that it oftentimes, what I'm advising when I'm brought in is after those starving moments have happened, where the culture truly is misaligned with whatever the leaders and the organization is trying to do strategically. So what I think you're saying, and I'm going to ask, this is what you're saying, is that really what we need to do is flip the switch a little bit. And if you know that you're coming into, for example, a merger, that's a strategy for growth. Tending up front to due diligence around the culture and the merger is just as important as due diligence around the financial piece. So that's how I kind of think of this model, as you can't really, in any change, eliminate any one of them at any point in time. They should all be considered together.
So the challenge I've faced while consulting, Lisa, is that typically an organization will come up and say that we need to do something about the organization culture, or people have been complaining that we don't have a great culture, they keep leaving. I don't think any employee leaves saying, I'm leaving because I don't agree with the strategy of this organization. So maybe a CEO or a CXO might. Regular employees don't really say stuff like that. So the question when I look at this model is, for any organization, where do you suggest should be the starting point? So do you start with strategy, then move to culture, then move to leadership, or do you address all of them together? What should be the starting point? How do you take this journey of building the three legs of the stool?
And are you asking that in the context of when a change is happening, or in the context of more of a startup situation, kind of where, you know, so some of the answer to that depends on where the organization's life cycle is, but I'm assuming you're kind of asking it in the realm of, we know we need some change.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, where do we begin? And to me, actually, if I had to pick one, it would be leadership, because that is the group of people who presumably have their finger on the pulse of where the organization should be going and vis-a-vis its vision, its mission, and that what changes to the strategy, whether it's a merger or whatever that is being discussed there, I think happens more powerfully in this model, you know, to balance these forces if you start with leadership and really look at what that group of people needs to discuss and what they need to know in order to make good decisions about the strategy and the culture. And then the other two legs to me are simultaneously. I do advise that very clearly, like there is not any need to separate them out, that you should be talking about the internal and external customers you have, right? At the same time.
Understood. That makes perfect sense. And I do have a follow-up question as well. Since we're talking about stools, with a typical stool, once you've got the three legs in place, you would end up sitting on it. Is that a good idea to do with culture as well? So how do you, the question I'm trying to ask in a roundabout way is, how do you carry on investing in these three pillars and making sure that the stool you're sitting on is built on sound foundations
And balanced enough so that
Absolutely.
It's not wobbly. Right.
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky question. I would, if I were in a workshop format, I would actually throw that out to the group and ask that for that input, because, and maybe there's folks in the chat that want to weigh in on this, because I do think it's, you know, it gets back to a little bit of that chicken or egg problem. But culture is really just how we work together to get things done and execute in the business. So the strategy to me is what we're going to do to win in our market. Those are the two questions that I see them, those two kind of categories broadly answering. And so I don't know how, I don't see them as separate, but I do think that you have, because of my bias in my work, you have a lot more buy-in to the strategic plan if you've engaged people in their fingerprints organizationally first. So I would tend to look at culture first in terms of evolving your strategy, because the people in the business will have a lot more buy-in to whatever that change is, but also ideas that you haven't thought of. You know, if you're flying at 30,000 feet, which I talk about a lot as leadership, you know, are sort of at that more elevated, they have just a broader view and landscape. You see a different landscape and view than you do when you're on the ground. And I think a lot of times what happens in business is that, you know, the pilots up in the cockpit are making the strategic decisions without talking to their ground crew. So that is where I would begin, is with culture, if I had to pick between any of the, you know, leadership first, obviously, to get alignment around what change needs to happen. But then as we're going about planning the change, I would reverse the order. Too much of the time, companies think they want to dot the I's and cross the T's on the strategy, and, you know, going back to the merger example, and and get the due diligence around that and get all excited about this possible match made in heaven, and they haven't really explored the cultural fit. So that I would, you know, I would just reverse the order of it and go, is this organization we're looking to acquire a good fit for us from a people standpoint and system standpoint?
Sure.
Does that make sense to you?
That makes perfect sense, absolutely. And no wonder, if I remember correctly, more than 80% of mergers fail. I mean, I could be wrong about the number a little bit, but I think that's the approximate number. And probably because organizations are not focusing enough on the culture. They're just thinking about vertical integration of products and building stronger supply chains and cutting costs and stuff like that, without focusing enough on how to bring two diverse cultures together.
Or where not to?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
You know, in some cases, and I agree, the sightings around merger failure is accurate, but and it's also what causes it is always in the culture and leadership category. So those are the places that if you're thinking about a merger, if you're plotting one, if you're got one on the radar there. I had a contact from an organization this past week that they've got a great culture, they've grown leaps and bounds. They're about to almost double their workforce within this year. And they are literally thinking ahead of, we know that we're going to be either acquiring or become acquired in our space within the next X number of years. And we want to know now what we should be doing to build the kind of culture that is, you know, healthy for that, or preserve the elements of the culture when that happens. I mean, that's awesome for a company to be thinking about that so far ahead. And I do think
that makes perfect sense.
I was going to say, I do think that culture has just become so prominent in our business dialogue now that this is not probably a lot of people sitting there shaking their heads going, what's she talking about? The real trick is that I think leaders need to understand what to do about it, because my experience, and of course, my experience is as an external consultant. So these are people that are confused about what needs to happen regarding culture. So that's where I've been playing in my, you know, that's the arena of my work. And what I see there is a lot of confusion at the executive level about what to do about culture. So it gets shortchanged, I think, not because people don't understand the importance of it and how much it contributes to success or failure, but because they don't know what the actual concrete steps are.
Agreed.
So I want to move into the 5 trends that I'm going to talk through for 2021. I did a fair amount of research for this, and hopefully, you know, some of these will make sense to you, and there'll be a couple of nuggets for everybody around this. So we've talked just for a few minutes, Sumit and I, about leadership role and culture building. And this is, before I get into trend number 1, I think one of the most important truths in business is that habits form through modeling, not preaching. So, and I use this example of, you're more likely to eat like your parents, regardless of what they tell you to eat. If your parents were active, you probably modeled the habit of exercise more naturally. Your culture today in your company is an expression of what past or current leaders do more than what they say. So the leadership piece of that stool is about identifying essential behaviors that leaders and managers have to live. And why is it these behaviors? What is the current state of these behaviors in our leadership, and how will we reinforce them? So I give some examples here because most of the time what I see as core values, and I'm going to talk about this a little later, are they're the posters on the wall. I know if Shar were sitting here, she would be like nodding her head. They're the posters on the wall, but they really aren't lived in behavior. So what we want to do is boil it down to behavior. And these examples aren't even as, I mean, these are, so one of these are broad categories of behaviors, but so fostering goodwill and trust, that is a more of a outcome-based behavior. Whereas I would cite one of my clients literally built most of their culture turnaround on one core behavior, and that was the assumption of positive intent. That every single person in the business was taught and reminded on a regular basis by leadership that if they were in conflict, if they were in disagreement, if things weren't working between people in the business, the assumption of positive intent. And that in itself was a core behavior that changed everything. So having that willingness to boil it down to behaviors is essential in terms of the leadership role. We talk, talking about the confluence between, or the connection between leadership and culture today. That's kind of where I live with that one. Anything you want to add there, Sumit?
I think the biggest takeaway for me here is what you said, that the behaviors need to manifest themselves in the organization, not just be posters on the wall. And that, I think, is the role of leadership, to bring forth, to make sure that the values, the culture that the organization promises on paper and in fancy marketing brochures is actually lived up to. And
Yeah.
it's probably one of the most important components of the employee experience. And again, I do remember some research where people said that they would take a salary hit if they had a better employee experience or a better culture to work in. And it wasn't really a minor hit. The average amount of pay people were willing to forego was to the tune of $21,000 per annum, which is a fairly reasonable amount of money.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
it's a lot of money where I live, of course, but I mean, I'm sure even in the US, it's a sizable amount of money.
Significant. That's $2,500 a month and plus. That's a lot of, that's a lot of capital that's placed on the idea of a good work environment. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that is as we move forward. But yeah, absolutely. Getting the values off the wall and into behavior is tricky. And I think, I advise companies to start with a couple, so as I mentioned, the example of the assumption of positive intent. And the other thing that I've seen work really well, and a couple of clients I've worked in, was declaring that our job here is to grow more leaders, because they knew they were growing, right, as an organization, and that they were going to have to fulfill a pipeline of leaders. But the most important role are the people who are enabling well-being of the people doing the work. So I think that I think there just can't be enough said about it, but we're going to move on and say some more about it as we go through some trends. So trend number 1, make innovation actually a core strategy in your business. So 95%, this is interesting, of economic profit is earned by the top 20% of companies, according to a recent study of trends by McKinsey. That tells us a lot, that the innovators are a small percentage of what is producing the true profitability in organizations. And 50% of annual company revenues across a broad range of industries are derived from new products launched within the past 3 years. So what I think the big innovation is, and the one that I teach in my work, is to evolve outdated management practices that have fueled this massive disengagement crisis in US workplaces. And that is something Gary Hamel talked about a number of years ago. I think if you're not actively investing in amplifying creativity in your culture, which is the foundation of innovation, is allowing creativity to flourish on teams. And that means not every idea is going to end up in the next great product. But it's this idea that people and the diversity of their thoughts and their ideas and their perspectives is being pulled out in a way that is creative and amplified. And businesses that aren't doing that are going to be risking extinction for sure. If you've got this kind of, hey, we're in it for the, as I pointed to the McKinsey narrative on how we have been operating with management practices for 250 years that are largely the same around control, around consistency. And it doesn't mean those things aren't important, but you've got to really infuse that with a dose of creativity. I'm going to talk a little bit more on some things to amplify that in the culture change trend a bit later. Do you have anything on this one that you'd like to weigh in on?
So it sounds great in principle, but I'm going to wear an employee's hat for a second and say, Lisa, we've had a tough year. As an employee, I don't know whether my job is safe. I've struggled with work stress, COVID stress, childcare, and a lot of uncertainty about other things in life. how do you expect me to innovate, or how do I contribute to the innovation culture that my employer talks about without feeling burnt out?
Yeah.
I'm barely staying afloat.
That's really, really good question. So I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that in the next trend, but I want to address it here because I think that that is the exact question, which is change is already burning people out, right? With the pace of it, with the acceleration of it, with just the grief of what we've been through this past year as on the world stage of, you know, losing so many humans to the pandemic and all of the things that have been lost. And so to me, the innovation piece with your question has to do with, so I talk about amplifying creativity. I think it comes to, okay, so let's take a simple example of one of the biggest relatable changes that has happened in 2020, and that's the move to remote work. Not everyone is thriving in that, right? But what innovation looks like is are you consistently as a manager group asking people what they need? Are you asking for their voice to come into play about how can we do this better? What are some creative ways in which we can make life easier in this very challenging moment? And listening to those voices and implementing those ideas, I think is an example of what I'm talking about when I'm asking companies to make innovation a strategy, which is to start practicing the habit of asking people in a structured and organized way for their input. And not just as a result of an engagement survey, are you engaged, but is really, how can we make changes here in a way that feels healthy to the business, you know, for the goals that we're trying to achieve for you personally.
Great. Thank you for answering that one.
Yeah, well, if that's not happening, it's actually going to be, I think, very difficult for organizations to ever have innovation if you're not addressing the reality of what's happening today. So it's a really good question. So trend number 2 is really builds right on this conversation, and that is well-being at work. And so I was surprised when I came across this. I had seen it last year before COVID hit. Deloitte's 2020 human capital study cited well-being as the top ranked trend. 80% of nearly 9,000 respondents identified it as important or very important to their organization's success. And this was before COVID. This was all done, you know, all this research was done back in 2019. What's still missing is this, they talk about this dual imperative of worker well-being and work transformation, which are not connected effectively. And you just pointed to it in your question, Sumit, that we have, you know, a lot of, it's a real juggling act for a lot of organizations right now. And there is a lot of people who are approaching burnout. But I think what's really hopeful to me is that 80% of people are identifying this. I mean, imagine, Sumit, 20 years ago, this wouldn't have even been, people would have been scratching their heads and going, what are you talking about well-being at work? I mean, at least that was how I experienced things earlier in my career. And I think what I believe is really powerful about this trend is that there's a recognition that the business growth, the results that happen in an organization is dependent on people still. So if we accept this as a reality that well-being is important, then, you know, what Shar was saying in the opening before we started today was that she's made a decision in her company, and she wants to come on and talk about this. It'd be a really good time to do that if she's listening, but in her company to, you know, have it be, sorry, I just had the
Yeah,
inauguration on.
well, that
Yeah.
wasn't me, but I'm here. Hi.
Hi, Shar. No, but just the inauguration is happening on my TV in the background, and the sound just came out. But yeah, just this whole idea that you are really seeing people's lives as just as important as the business that they do and the work they do for your business.
Absolutely. Well, it began actually as early as April. in March. And we did have a few employees fakely say they had COVID when they really didn't, but which was an interesting thing because they wanted to take time off work. But I think it was at that moment
So
we
that can
really
happen
started.
too. And let's talk about
Yeah.
that in this parking lot, that one, because that can happen too. People will take advantage of it, right? But you know, yeah.
Wait, let's parking lot that one because I'll share the experience. But on this particular topic, we really started evaluating the fact that my employees are public facing. My employees are facing customers face to face. And with our former practices, some of the things that we do literally require that our employees are inches away from the public. And we really had to think long and hard about how can we have the social distancing aspect to protect the health and well-being of our employees. And that required a meeting with my staff and really to get the innovation, the ideas, and really think about what can we do differently to protect them and their own personal well-being in the public. And so I saw all over the media, obviously, you know, a lot of banks and nail technicians and those in the service level industry, the restaurants, started either closing down or, you know, having you wipe your feet, sanitizing, hand sanitizers, all of that. And by the way, in Mexico, they're doing a far better job in all of those categories than they're doing in the United States. I'll just make that little side comment. But it is really important to think about this and the fact that when either you end up with the COVID or any other health condition, or your family member does, that it's a different level of compassion and caring and providing the resources that employees truly need to help their well-being. And I would say that when I was the regional talent management director and organizational effectiveness director of Kaiser Permanente, I had a really strong partnership with the wellness director because we were really trying to figure out how do you solve the puzzle of integrating talent management strategy and wellness strategy together. And we were talking about that. So I left that company in 2016. So now what are we, almost 5 years later here, right? And we're realizing that it looks so different now. How to have a work environment that has well-being without it just being, well, oh yeah, we have a company gym. Yeah, our company offers flu shots to our frontline workers, which at the time was required for all of our nurses. You know, yeah, our company gives all employees little pedometers to put on their belt so that we can track the number of steps that they're taking every day. The well-being today is extremely different. And well-being now is more holistic. It's more about mental health well-being. It's more about stress management. It's more about how can we truly have a healthcare program and while maintaining the cost implications, but how can we improve our healthcare while maintaining the cost impact of the company?
Right.
So I could go on and on and on. So when you have your question here, what is still missing? What's missing is that we need to sit down and have a conversation with your staff, because every one of your staff have different talents, perspectives, and probably have done a job elsewhere, be it health industry or not, that has some very innovative, creative ideas about what we can do to improve health in the work environment.
Yeah.
And so this is what we do. We talk about it, and we talk about well-being at every single staff meeting. This is like, yeah. And
Yeah.
many of our employees have had some amazing ideas and concepts, And we've actually impacted those, and it's made a tremendous difference.
Yeah, totally makes sense. It's not hard to believe that there's a connection there. But I did place a study in the chat if anybody's interested in on that linkage. It was a SHRM sponsored study, so for your interest.
Awesome. Awesome. I want that. I want to grab that for sure. I think that one of the things that I want to point out to build on what Shara is saying here is that I've heard a lot of stories from clients around how conflict and bullying didn't stop when the offices went vacant. And so being really aware and sensitive that there are people at home working from home now that feel like they're being left out of meetings or Slack threads. There's no opportunity for a one-on-one with their manager for months on end. You know, surveys sort of about engagement, they don't really result in any changes. And I think, and in, you know, some extreme cases, demands to return to the office before, you know, COVID was under control, irrespective of home life challenges. There are some different flavors of the challenges that are happening today when people aren't in a building together. But when you put people together, whether they're via Zoom or, you know, in a building together, there's still going to be conflict. There's still going to be confusion at times, or, you know, even verging on paranoia. If you're not actually sitting with people and you can see the person across from you, you might be more quick to make up a story about what's happening there. And so that's, that kind of is an important thing to remember as well, that this is, it really means a little bit of extra attention on checking in with people, you know, and not ditching your commercial lease yet, because the remote work experiment is still fairly new. And there's a lot of people that will do better if they at least have part of their time in an office.
Okay, another parking lot topic, but the trigger word that you brought up is bullying. We will have a whole topic on that.
I think that's actually would be a good topic for this forum, because it, you know, it is subtle in many cases. We think of playground bullying as something that's very overt, but a lot of what's going on is subtle and
Yes,
not something that is easy to point out or call out.
well, if I could, do you mind if I share a quick story?
Please.
Please. All right. So we have negotiation with malls because, believe it or not, my company's thriving, and yes, we are still open and facing the public, and yes, we're working at malls.
I wanted to give a shout out to all of the healthcare, restaurant, and retail workers who are putting their health on the line.
Yes, and mall employees and retail,
fed and cared for.
Retail, grocery stores. So my example is that one of my two of my leaders that recently promoted manager and my director were deeply concerned because we have a location that is outside of a big box location. I'll just say they're called Nordstrom's. But they were basically, they have a coffee shop, and they were telling our employees that they can't talk to people that come in front of our location, that they're not allowed to talk to the public from our location. And not only that, a line was basically crossing our entire front of the store. My employees were really, really upset, and the fact that our productivity was limited, which impacts my employees' income. And we had another owner of a company, and he was mad about it. And he started screaming and yelling and bullying on Zoom some of my staff about it. And I immediately said, we are ending this call right now. We don't bully our leaders and our staff. And it was a Zoom call. It was a conversation on a Zoom call. So we ended the meeting. So now we're adding the bullying rule. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be added to our policies. We're going to be doing some sessions, discussion about virtual bullying, because it wasn't just the Zoom call, it was also texting. Because yes, most of our employees text and communicate. And there's text bullying, just like what kids deal with in school.
Yeah.
And I would say in other workplaces, I would assume, because yes, in the healthcare system, there's something called hazing. And sometimes the newer nurses that come into the work environment are, quote, hazed.
Mhm.
And it's still happening, except virtually.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
So we do
yeah,
have I think you're spot on with needing to have mental and emotional policies, that support worker well-being. I love what you're saying about that. And that can include things like regular check-ins from managers. How are you doing? Pulse
yes,
check in the company. How are we doing? And then I think that this idea that you're talking about, Shar, about teams developing with this very core spirit of caring for one another. So if they
right.
have differences, there's still this thing of caring for one another. And if someone on the team is not exhibiting that behavior, that positive intent, or the spirit in which caring is at the center, we care about each other first and foremost, even if we don't agree, even if we're not alike, even if I don't understand you, I care about you because you're part of my team. And that to me is one of the most important changes that needs to happen if we're going to have this idea of culture at the center, this idea of innovation as a strategy. Is you've got to set aside some time for fun and play, even if it's the first minute of the Zoom meeting, right?
Right.
And weekly communications, I think, is another piece from the CEO right now during a massive change in an organization. The communication has to be more frequent.
Well, the last thing I'll say, and then let you go on with your presentation, go back to your core values. What are your core values? Our core values are compassion, dignity, and respect. So what are your core values? Are you truly living them? And then back to the way we structure our work schedules. Yes, we need to look at our work schedule so our employees can have time to work on their well-being, to work on getting exercise and eating healthy and taking care of their families and facilitating that. So absolutely. So
Yeah. And I think that the way you just said it is perfect. Ask your people. They'll tell you what they need if they know you care. And that's one of the biggest things I think that disconnect that connection between leaders who are promoted because they have demonstrated they care for people, not just because they happen to be the smartest person in the company.
Absolutely. And in fact, the research you quoted in the beginning, Lisa, is very insightful. And I'm quite proud of it because I was the India champion for the HR trends at Deloitte.
Awesome.
A slightly lesser known fact is that Deloitte is one of the few organizations that has had a chief well-being officer for
Really?
over half a decade now. So it's been about
A
6
chief
years since they created
officer,
a
C-suite.
chief well-being officer. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. How cool is that? What does that person, I don't want to say do, because I can imagine that, but what's their overall responsibility?
So they take care of things like work-life integration. They promote employee wellness, and it could range from basic things like health checkups for everyone to instituting policies and processes that support people. Like Deloitte has a policy of happiness time off. So wherein you don't have to specify a reason, there are a few days that you get off in a year. You can just take those days off at a day's notice. So it could be for a birthday, an anniversary, or you're just feeling stressed. So you can take a half a day off, or you can take the full day off. And that's outside of your regular leave.
Yeah, no questions asked.
No questions asked. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's key, isn't it? That you're not going to be punished, because in the earlier sort of, industrial era, I think there has been this norm perpetuated that the people who, the warriors who are putting in the 100-hour weeks, right, are the people who get promoted. And if you choose not to do that, you fall behind. And I think we're entering a new stage in which people's lives are integrated more completely around family and business and work and play. And there's an acknowledgement of that's happening. That's certainly a really great example of it. So I want to talk about trend number 3, which so each year I do this exercise. Instead of New Year's resolutions, I reflect on and declare my word. I actually did this when I was visiting my good friend Char down in Puerto Vallarta, where she is hanging out. And I did that over the New Year one day, overlooking the ocean, which was absolutely beautiful and really fun to be able to have the opportunity to do it that way. But I try to establish an intent and a theme for my year, personally and professionally. So this year, the word that came to me was confidence. And it came to me really in terms of how I want to step forward and step out a little bit more in sharing some of this wisdom about well-being at work and about culture. But I think it's also, I was reflecting on it, I realized it's also what we need in the world. So restoring confidence first and foremost in leadership. And especially, you know, in our country's governance, you know, with just some of the shakiness that's happened in the United States, but just beyond also in business and in corporations. Dictionary.com defines confidence as full trust, belief in the powers, trustworthiness, or reliability of a person or thing. So if this resonates for you, I invite you to introduce this actually as a discussion topic in your company. What creates trust and confidence in leadership? And especially here in our organization, you know, within your executive and management ranks. It's a really powerful conversation if done with the right ground rules and changes are implemented as a result. I've often facilitated a version using Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team pyramid. So this is showing that trust is the foundation of what creates accountability and results. If any of you read that book, used that book, we use that book as a foundation, and this pyramid for one of the clients I worked with, their entire culture change was really built around this concept that trust is the foundation in which you can have disagreement, and that you can have these debates, you can have these conversations that are about, we don't agree, but we're going to hear and understand all points of view before we make a commitment and decision. And those 2 bottom parts of this pyramid, I've seen in action with leadership, that creates confidence organizationally and leads to commitments that then the accountability results fall out of that. So I think one bad actor in an organization, no matter how healthy you think your culture is, can destroy confidence in leadership. And this is you know, a lot of that is really about organizations leave those people unchecked because their results or their technical contributions are so big. And you know, a new generation of talent's not going to stand for it. That's really the simple truth. Previous generations considered bad bosses part of the territory. There was a whole famous cartoon built on it called Dilbert, right? But millennials and Gen Z demand leaders who support good teamwork and the ability to speak up, and leaders who build safety emotionally and psychologically.
And so Lisa, since I think we only have a couple of minutes left here, I just want to throw this in before we wrap up here, that Sam's going to throw up a poll, and I think people could talk with you directly about some of those specific concepts that you're talking about.
This deck will be made available, and there's some cool stuff at the end of the deck that I'm not going to I wasn't planning to really go through it in detail, but this presentation deck is available for those of you who are listening on Comp Team. But I want to I think I'm done with confidence and leadership topic for the moment, but I can't emphasize enough that if there were one thing, as Sumit and I were talking about at the beginning, that you can do, it's this. Trend number 4 is to make, let's see, why am I not moving? What is happening here? Okay, here we go. Diversity and inclusion, let's take meaningful action. 7% of job seekers consider workplace diversity an important factor when considering employment opportunities. That's from Glassdoor. And 45% of American workers experienced discrimination or harassment in the past year. To me, one of the most powerful and courageous actions of our time is making the business norm to stand for people from all walks of life. And by the way, this is really a parallel in nature. Diverse ecosystems are much stronger against extinction. So I don't want to I do not want to overgeneralize the longstanding role of HR in the organization, but there have been credibility issues with HR from throughout my career, as cited by employees, they work for the company, not for the people. And I think if this is a huge opportunity that is ripe for human resource departments to claim their long desired and needed role as a full-fledged business partner. It's in the area of concrete strategies, education and training to make diversity, inclusion, and equity a reality. So it's not about just promoting more people of color. We all know that there is, that's one good outcome, but I think it's really important to take courageous changes in the systems. And one of them that I teach is providing educational tools and strategies in all management and leadership classes around eliminating, first and foremost, the mindset of discrimination, if that's what your company stands for. So it's not about eliminating bias, that's human, but it's choosing a mindset that supports cultural practices that are colorblind. So I'm not going to, because of our time, not going to go too much more deeply into that, but that is trend number 4. And trend number 5 is bolder culture change. So this is that same human capital report we were talking about earlier, Sumit and I. 70% of companies from that same 2020 report are undertaking or experimenting with bold moves in cultural change. And those are around agility, innovation of hierarchy, and automating to eliminate bureaucracy. So these are some very important culture changes you can consider taking on in your business. I want to just talk about basics here. I want to show you a couple of ways that we go about this. And as I had mentioned, this presentation is available for you to download from the Comp Team site. But this is our step-by-step culture assessment process. And there's also a leadership workshop process around these 5 habits that we give you the sort of step-by-step of what you can do organizationally to create both a cultural assessment of where do we need to change, as well as leadership conversations about what do we need to show behaviorally in the organization to really change the way that we do work forever. So with that, any other final thoughts or questions, Sam, Sumit?
No, what I would say is that those last few slides, this process of what to do in organizations and how you walk them through it, it sounds like a very interesting. I'd love to have you talk on that on the next engagement a few weeks from now when we talk about culture again, to go through that. I think that sounds like a great topic. So, but thank you, Elisa and Sumit for that conversation around those trends for this 2021.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
So one thing
go ahead.
We all care for each other so much, we know how to interrupt well.
Yeah, that's right. So just a few things on in closing, as we just have a few more minutes, I want to mention is that our sponsor TMA, we are going to have a special event next month. Next month, it's going to be an expert workshop, and it's an international forum. We're going to bring in a variety of talent management professionals from across the globe they're going to speak on topics specifically on integrated talent management, from sourcing talent all the way through succession planning and outplacement and development and teaming and all those aspects. So really excited for that event. I did release that poll as mentioned earlier, so you can sign up for that there. Also, we'll be bringing that back up on future forums next week and so forth to give you other opportunities to sign up. You also will find this posted on LinkedIn, so you can find the registration page there, as well as the recorded versions of this session. So you'll see some of those versions on LinkedIn and also on our Facebook Live page, where you can go there and revisit any of the recordings, as well as YouTube and our website. So lots of places to look. Maybe I should make a list of all those places where we're broadcasting, so you can see the different areas.
I think it's a good idea, definitely.
Yeah. But I do want to bring up, actually, I'm lost here. Oh, here we go. Monty is going to be speaking next Wednesday. Is that so? On hiring for the right competencies and behaviors. So we'll have that that piece together. And so I'm really excited to have Monty back to go through that detail.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal talent acquisition expert, and I've utilized him with some of my interim HR director accounts, and he's as well as my company right now. He's phenomenal. He's awesome.
Yay. That's going to be a great discussion. Well, and I think that, you know, that really is going to build well on what we were talking about this week with the culture piece too, Sam, that, you know, that's how you enable that caring and well-being is through hiring people that, you know, you can measurably demonstrate the gel opportunity there, right?
Right.
And isn't that really kind of what talent management's all about?
Absolutely. Well, as we're at the top of the hour, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to visiting again next week. But thank you, Lisa, specifically, and Sumit for the wonderful content. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you all, and please share, like, and tune in to us next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Thank you all for joining us.
All right.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.